Thank you very much. I will be brief, and I'll kind of state the obvious here. Guantanamo is not closed. We've got 178 men still there from over a dozen countries. 1.5 years after President Obama promised to close the prison, and 8.5 years after the first prisoners were brought to Guantanamo. What's important here is not just closing the prison, but closing the policies that gave rise to the prison and that are allowing it to exist. We haven't even really begun talking in a serious way about Bagram. All of our focus has been on Guantanamo. There have been a lot of resources thrown at Guantanamo. I can't believe we're still talking about it given the amount of energy and attention and resources that have been spent over the past 8.5 years on it, but we are not even talking in a serious way or with enough visibility and attention about the 600 or more men who are in Bagram and other prisons in Iraq. Prisons we're not even aware of still. President Obama closed CIA prisons. He did not close all secret sites that are held by covert units of the Department of Defense. There are loopholes that President Obama has found that make it trickier to address what he's doing and that make it all the more incumbent on us to inform ourselves about exactly what is going on so that we can talk about what's happening in a smarter way and in a more effective way, because it is much harder under this president. I wanted to talk about two stories, one that sort of keeps me going because this is very hard work, as all of you know, and one that sort of raises the need for continued visibility on Guantanamo and other detention practices. I'll be very brief, and then I wanted to tell you about a list of demands that we have. We've drafted at CCR a collective statement that I wanted to either put up here or circulate around and get all of you here to sign on. If you believe in it, if you agree with it, we'll use it in our advocacy. We'll try to post it in a paper. We'll show it to our clients in prison. It'll mean something, and so I do want to do that too, but I will be brief. The one story that I wanted to share that keeps me going is probably the best day that I had at CCR yesterday in my years there. The background to this is that we have represented a father and son from Syria since 2005. They were separated for 8.5 years in detention, didn't have the basic right of family unification, to see each other for 8 years in prison, were held without charge, without a court even reviewing their case, despite this empty right to habeas corpus that we, the lawyers, have established in the courts, but that actually hasn't meant that much in terms of actual implementation to the men. The men who are being released, let there be no secret about it, it's about politics. It hasn't been about the rule of law. It's about what country you're from and how the U.S. has been negotiating with other countries for release. There is a reason why of the 178 men who are in Guantanamo right now, 90 of them are from Yemen. There is a reason why the first prisoners who were released were from European countries. Politics has so much to do with what's going on and who gets released and who doesn't. But anyway, back to these men. We represented both of them. The son, Mohammed, was released in August of 2009. His father was held for another year. Mohammed was faced with a tortuous decision of accepting an offer for resettlement in Portugal, where he is now, and choosing and essentially saying goodbye to his father in prison. He chose to go to Portugal. His father remained behind. Last weekend, his father was finally offered resettlement by another country, Cape Verde, which wasn't Portugal, but it was a former colony of Portugal. So you can sort of put two and two together about how that happened. The best day that I had was speaking with Abdel Nasser, the father, yesterday on the telephone and patching in his son so that they could, for the first time, speak to each other and hear each other's voices, and then patched in their family in Syria, who they will probably not see ever or for years, and just hearing their voices on our conference system at CCR, standing over it and hearing the Arabic that I couldn't quite understand, was a moment of beauty in all of this cruelty and all of the ugliness and injustice.
Can you do it?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the good story. The bad story is that on the same day that Abdel Nasser was transferred last Saturday, there was a man from Algeria, Abdelaziz Naji, who was transferred by force, pulled from his cell. This is a man who had spent 8.5 years trying to go anywhere but Algeria. And under President Obama, under this administration, there was the first forcible transfer from Guantanamo. That happened Saturday. Mr. Naji, his whereabouts are not known right now. All we know is that he was transferred out of Guantanamo. His family has had no access to him. His attorneys don't know where he is. We're getting calls from reporters. You know, I don't see the outrage. There's been some media coverage. We're trying to do everything we can at CCR to put out statements and demand that the Algerian government come forward and give us assurances about where he's being held and his well-being. But there hasn't been the outrage that there used to be under Bush, and I'm not clear why that is the case. Is it because it's Obama and people think that if this individual was transferred under Obama, his situation must, you know, be better than it might have been under Bush? I don't know, but we need to keep the spotlight on this individual. There are 5 men from Algeria who remain at Guantanamo who face the same risk, and we need visibility, we need attention on what's happening to Mr. Naji right now, and we need to make sure that the role of the U.S. government is not lost here. Yes, Algeria needs to come forward and confirm his whereabouts and confirm that he is safe and well, but the fact that President Obama authorized his transfer by force cannot be lost. So we need attention on that as well. In the 1 minute I have left, I just want to briefly tell you what our demands are, and then I will leave this statement up here. If you can come up here, if you agree with what I'm saying and sign on to it, I will take this back to CCR if we can get as many signatures as possible, and we will use this. We will post it, we will make these demands visible, and we will share it with our clients who it will mean something to. So what we are asking is, 1, to recommit to rapidly closing Guantanamo and having the government publicly admit that the men taken there were not the worst of the worst, as we know now. It is well known that the majority should never have been captured in the first place and are victims. If President Obama were to exercise leadership and acknowledge this, it would help address the wrong done to the men there, and it would help create a political atmosphere necessary to close the prison finally and deliver justice to those wrongfully detained. Second demand is to charge or release the men who are still at Guantanamo and abandon the power to hold any of them in indefinite detention, as the government is proposing to do still. There is now a 3rd category of people that the Obama administration believes they can hold without charge or release, men who they have deemed unilaterally are too dangerous to release, but against whom there is not enough evidence to charge. We are talking right now about a small group of people, but the fact that that policy is out there and being advocated is terrifying. Third demand is to stop punishing men from Yemen who've been cleared by the government, who have won their habeas cases, from being able to return to their home countries. There is right now an indefinite suspension of transfers, repatriations to Yemen that was put in place 3 days after a Nigerian man allegedly tried to attack a U.S. airliner. Because in reaction to that, and political reaction to that, there are 90 men who are now suffering in Guantanamo and cannot return to their home countries because Obama didn't have the leadership to stand up to political pressure. The next demand is to ensure accountability for the crimes committed, not just to close the prison, but to have accountability for what's happened there and the devastation that this has caused to families and countless communities. To investigate the cases of men who have died at Guantanamo, including 3 men who we represent who died in 2006, who there are now credible reports may have been murdered to death. There's an article in Harper's Magazine by Scott Horton that came out in January of 2010. I would encourage you all to read it. It is about a secret site at Guantanamo called Camp No, and the fact that these men may have been taken there, tortured, and murdered, essentially. These are men that the U.S. military said committed suicides since 2006, and that is what their families have had to live with since then. And the last thing is to stop forcibly transferring people and to prevent transfers like Mr. Naji experienced. So I will leave this up here. Please sign on to it if you agree with it. And thank you very much.